You ever had one of those conversations where your entire life goes from "I think I've got things mostly under control" to "Oh, brilliant, I'm now a pawn in my parents' deluded Monopoly game"? Yeah, that was me. I was in love, proper love. The kind of love where you've survived assembling IKEA furniture together and still want to share a duvet. Holly and I had been together for 4 years. We had a rented shoebox flat in Walthamstow with a leaky tap, 2 houseplants. We regularly forgot to water in dreams of one day owning a kettle that didn't scream like a banshee. It was chaotic. It was perfect. Then came the talk. Mom calls me round for a roast, which looking back should have tipped me off. She only does roasts when something's gone terribly wrong, or she's about to emotionally blackmail someone. So I show up, there's Yorkshire puds, too much gravy, and Dad sitting at the table like he's waiting to pitch on Dragon's Den. Mom opens with, "Darling, your life's going nowhere and your relationship with that what's her name? Holly?" "Yes, sir, it's just not strategic, love." Strategic like I'm NATO. And dating Holly might spark a war with the upper middle class. Then Dad chimes in all serious and spreadsheety. "We've had an offer from the Thompsons, Abigail's parents. They're willing to offer us £500,000 if you marry their daughter," just like that. As if they were offering me a second helping of MASH. As if marrying a real-life human woman was just a mildly inconvenient favor I could do in exchange for financial solvency. Now I wish I could say, I stood up, made a stirring speech about autonomy and love and how we don't barter human lives over roast dinners. But what actually came out was, £500,000, because even my moral compass occasionally takes a tea break. And Mum, bless her manipulative little soul, goes, "Just think what we could do with that money. Darling, you'd be set. You could finally move out of that place." That place being the flat in Walthamstow she'd never actually visited, but had somehow decided was one spilled Deliveroo away from a crime scene. Look, let me be clear. I didn't want to marry Abigail. I'd never even met Abigail. All I knew was she'd been described to me as lovely, but in a wheelchair, like her being disabled was some sort of negative Yelp review. But to my parents, that 500 grand was a ticket out of their overdraft. Dad's failing garden shed business and Mum's eternal feud with Sandra. From number 6 over, who gets the bigger carport? And suddenly my actual feelings, those warm, fragile things I'd spent 4 years building with Holly, meant about as much as the side salad no one eats at Nando's. In the end, I just sat there chewing cold parsnips, wondering how exactly I'd gone from slightly underpaid marketing assistant in love to bargain, been royal in an arranged marriage saga. Because apparently in Britain, we don't do drama, we just quietly ruin lives over a roast and pretend it's tradition. So the first time I met Abigail, I was wearing a hoodie with a questionable stain, and the kind of trainers that practically scream, I gave up halfway through my 20s. She, meanwhile, looked like she'd just stepped out of a Waitrose Christmas advert. Cashmere jumper in that shade of beige only rich people can pull off. Pearl earrings. Not the fake ones you get from Argos, actual pearls. The type you inherit alongside a minor estate and a mildly racist great-aunt. And then there was the wheelchair. Now look, I'm not a monster. I wasn't put off by it, but no one had really explained the details. All I'd been told was there was an accident, followed by a vague hand gesture and the word polo, like that somehow made it self-explanatory. Polo, as in horses, as in the kind of sport that exists exclusively for people who call their grandparents mater and pater. So obviously, I show up thinking I'm going to meet a normal woman who just happens to use a wheelchair. Instead, I'm greeted by what can only be described as Kate Middleton, his distant cousin with a touch of mystery, trauma, and a multi-million-pound trust fund. She was polite. Too polite. The sort of polite where you're not sure if someone's being lovely or just silently deciding you'd never survive a wine tasting. And she looked at me like I was a stray dog who'd wandered into Harrods. "It's lovely to meet you," she said, in a voice that sounded suspiciously like it belonged on Radio 4 right after the Archers. I said something awkward, probably about the weather because I'm British and emotionally stunted, and she gave a tiny smile. The kind of smile that says, "Yes, you've confirmed every low expectation I had." I tried to be normal, ask questions, get to know her. "So, what do you do for fun?" "Oh, I garden, I read. I knit for a local hospice." "Of course you do, Abigail. Of course you do." Meanwhile, I'd spent the last 3 nights eating Monster Munch in bed and binging old Taskmaster episodes like a man unraveling. And then I made the rookie mistake of mentioning Holly. Not on purpose, obviously. I'm not that stupid. But she asked about my past and I panicked and said, I used to live with someone, and her posh little eyebrow twitched like I'd said I'd murdered a vicar. Oh, a roommate? Girlfriend, ex now, obviously. Cue the polite nod. The how quaint face. The internal scream I had to swallow with lukewarm Earl Grey. Honestly, I felt like I was being interviewed for a position I hadn't applied for. Like the role of husband had already been cast and I was just some poor sod brought in to read lines while they adjusted the lighting. And yet, despite the awkward silences and the emotional whiplash of pretending this wasn't completely insane, there was something calm about her, not warm exactly, but poised, steady, like she knew exactly who she was, which was honestly more than I could say for myself at that point. Still, all I could think was, how the hell is this my life now? One week I'm arguing with Holly about which bin the oat milk carton goes in. The next I'm sipping tea with a posh girl in a wheelchair who might end up being my wife if my parents get their way and I don't grow a spine in time to stop them. Because nothing says romance like emotionally suppressing your desires so your parents can clear their mortgage and stop fighting about curtain rods, right? So imagine trying to break up with someone you've shared 4 Christmases with 2 family funerals and 1 accidental IKEA bed frame injury. I didn't even get past the second sentence. She clocked it immediately, said, "Don't bother, I can see it in your face. You've done something pathetic again, haven't you?" Which, yes, correct. I told her about the arrangement, the money, the marriage, the wheelchair, the roast dinner negotiations that led to my spiritual collapse. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't beg. She walked over to the windowsill, picked up my favorite mug, the one with the little cartoon sausage dog. I got in Whitby and launched it straight out the 3rd floor window. Not a word, just a perfect clean arc, straight into the communal bins like she'd trained for it. Then she turned to me and said, and I quote, "Hope your new wife enjoys limp noodles and emotionally constipated men." Brutal. Fair. I stood there like a lemon trying to form words, and she just walked past me calm as anything, grabbed the air fryer, put it in a tote bag, and left. She took the bloody air fryer, the one functioning appliance in that flat, the only thing that ever consistently gave me joy and crispy chips. You know what else she took? The houseplants. The nice ones we got from Columbia Road. She even left a note on the soil of the snake plant that just said, "You don't deserve this either." And the thing is, I did love her. Still do if I'm being honest, which is inconvenient, given the whole impending marriage to someone else situation. She texted me once afterwards, just one time, said, "I hope the money keeps you warm at night." I didn't reply. What could I say? She was right. I didn't break up with her because I stopped loving her. I broke up with her because my parents threw $500,000, quit in the air like some twisted version of Deal or No Deal, and I folded like an M&S deck chair. And look, I wish I could say I did it all for some noble reason, that I was protecting Holly from a miserable life with a spineless wreck of a man. But really, I was just scared. Of disappointing my parents. Of being broke forever. Of choosing love and ending up with overdraft charges and a landlord who keeps forgetting we exist. So yeah, she kept the air fryer. She earned it, and I've been reheating sadness in the oven ever since. So we got married. In Surrey, obviously. Because if you're going to seal your fate like a Victorian boarding school boy being packed off to war, you might as well do it somewhere leafy with suspiciously expensive bunting. The venue was one of those converted barns that probably used to house horses and now costs $15,000 for a weekend and a sad-looking DJ in a waistcoat. White roses everywhere. Table names based on bloody Shakespeare quotes. There was even a harpist, a real one, blonde, ethereal. Definitely hates men. She only made eye contact with Abigail. I wore a suit that made me look like I was going to read the news at a funeral. Abigail wore ivory and pearls, and had her hair done in soft curls that made her look like she was about to issue a national apology for colonization. She did look beautiful. I'll give her that. But there we were, and me, standing stiff as a Cadbury flake in a fridge, and her serene and glowing, wheeling slowly down the aisle like she was being unveiled to the press. We had matching wheelchairs. That's right. Her actual chair and my symbolic one, because emotionally, I'd fully committed to a state of paralysis myself. Honestly, if there'd been a third chair, my dignity could have sat in it. Dad did a speech. Of course he did. Spoke about duty and legacy, like he was introducing the next monarch instead of covering up the fact he had emotionally bribed his own son into a wedding to fund a second-hand Audi and a conservatory. This marriage is a union of families, of values, of futures. He looked smug. Mum looked like she'd swallowed a diamond ring. I looked like I wanted to crawl under the canapé table and sob into a mini quiche. Let's talk about the food. There was a lot of food, but none of it edible. One canapé tasted like disappointment wrapped in phyllo pastry. Another was a tiny square of beetroot pretending to be innovative. The Prosecco was warm. The vol au vents were cold. My soul was medium rare. And the guests? God, the guests. All of Abigail's side. Doctors, diplomats, people who actually know what to do at a cheese board. My lot were huddled in the corner by the open bar, trying to figure out how to ask the barman for sambuca without using full sentences. I drank 4 glasses of Prosecco in 10 minutes. Mum kept telling people how proud she was. Abigail's mother kept looking at me like I was a puppy she hadn't wanted, but had agreed to foster for appearances. And I was trying not to cry on the wedding cake. It had 3 tiers, each one a different flavor, each one more metaphorically hollow than the last. Some cousin of Abigail's did, a reading, U.H. Auden or something equally tragic. I didn't really hear it. I was too busy thinking about Holly, about how she'd laugh at the table centerpieces, about how she'd definitely have nicked a bottle of wine and hidden it under the table for emergencies, about how she never once made me feel like my life was a chess piece in someone else's game of posh expectations. The photographer told me to smile with my eyes. I wanted to tell him to get in the bin. I smiled. Of course I did. We do that here. We smile even when everything's on fire, especially then. That was the day I officially became a very polite, very British version of a hostage, with complimentary Prosecco and a thank you card from my mother. So married life. We moved into a detached house in a cul-de-sac, so peaceful it actually made me anxious. Birds chirped. Neighbors waved. The bins got collected on time. It was the sort of place where nothing technically goes wrong, just your entire sense of self. The house was Abigail's, of course, a gift from her parents, because nothing says true love like being gifted a 4-bed in Surrey with a downstairs wet room and passive surveillance from the homeowner's WhatsApp group. Inside it had the personality of a John Lewis catalog. Cream walls, taupey curtains, coffee table books that no one's allowed to open. The kind of place where you feel like you're constantly being watched by an invisible Margaret who'll tut if you put your mug down. Without a coaster. We had separate bedrooms. Her room was minimalist, stylish, and smelt faintly of Chanel and Control. Mine looked like a glorified guest room that someone had begrudgingly let a man enter. I had a chair. A lamp, 1 drawer. Romance. A nurse came twice a week, friendly, very professional, clearly briefed not to ask too many questions about why the husband spends most of his time in the shed. And I took up gardening. No, not in a wholesome Monty Don communing with the dahlias sort of way. More like aggressively pruning hedges while wondering how the hell my life turned into a Radio 4 drama with no laughs and too much compost. I'd be out there in the drizzle, hacking away at a shrub like it owed me money, just to avoid another breakfast of uncomfortable silence and Abigail reading the Telegraph with the smug energy of someone who's never once used a reduced yellow sticker. She'd sit there immaculately dressed at 8 a.m., sipping Earl Grey from a china cup like she was auditioning for The Crown. I, meanwhile, was still in pajama bottoms and a t-shirt that said, "Nando's is my safe space." We didn't argue exactly. That would imply passion or effort. Instead, we mastered the fine art of the pointed silence, the polite that means I despise you, the casual interesting, which in our house translated to, "You're a colossal disappointment, and I hope you choke on your toast." She kept making cryptic little comments over breakfast like, "Well, timing is everything, isn't it? Freedom looks different to everyone," which I assumed were just posh ways of saying Mercury was in retrograde or whatever. So I nodded and went back to pretending to read The Guardian while Googling, "How long do roses take to die naturally?" She never mentioned love, never asked about my day, never even commented on the fact that I once accidentally dyed all my white boxers pink and wore them for a week out of spite. It was like living with a very polite stranger who knew your bank balance and had seen your bare arse on your wedding night. We had dinner together occasionally, microwaved lasagna in complete silence while the telly played, Antiques Roadshow in the background, because nothing sets the mood quite like a man discovering his nan's spoon is worth $200 while your wife ignores you in a velvet house robe. I'd started talking to the garden gnome. Not metaphorically. I mean, I actually named him Dave and gave him a backstory. Dave had seen things. Dave understood. This was the part no one warns you about. Not the wedding. Not the money. Not even the silent class warfare every time someone says supper instead of dinner. It's the emptiness. The echo of your own thoughts ricocheting off beige walls, while your soul quietly packs a bag and mutters, "I'll be back when you've sorted your life out." But hey, on the bright side, the neighbors thought we were very stable, which in suburban terms just means not screaming in the driveway. And isn't that the dream? Right, picture this, it's a Tuesday, rainy obviously. I'm half slumped on the sofa, in that perfect post-lunch, pre-existential crisis window, watching Come Dine With Me because I like my emotional damage with a side of overcooked scallops and passive-aggressive dessert rounds. And then she walks into the lounge, on legs, her actual legs. No chair, no nurse, no dramatic reveal involving a trumpet fanfare or slow-mo lighting. Just striding in like she's about to ask where the remote is. And I, like the emotionally shattered Victorian ghost I'd become, nearly died mid-bite of my pork pie. She clocked me staring, paused slightly. Probably because I looked like I was about to be sectioned, then casually goes, "You've got pork jelly on your chin." Sorry, what? You've got functioning legs, and I'm the scandal here because I missed my mouth. Now let me clarify. This woman had spent a year being wheeled around like the lady of the manor. Every dinner, every bloody brunch, even the one time we had people over and she did this whole, "Oh, do excuse me, my circulation's acting up" routine while I was trying to remember if I'd hidden my antidepressants in the medicine cupboard or behind the quinoa. And now she's walking, striding, confidently with coordination, not even a limp for nostalgia, just years of elaborate theater undone by her need to check if Come Dine With Me was the Friday repeat or a new series. My brain was doing backflips, which is ironic because she apparently could too. I just sat there, pork pie half chewed, staring at the woman I'd married under the premise that she needed a companion, a carer, a life partner, you know, like those charity leaflets with pictures of golden retrievers and sad violin music. Turns out I was less Florence Nightingale and more glorified garden gnome with a credit score. The betrayal wasn't even about the walking, really. It was the casualness of it. Yeah, I've got full motor control anyway, how's your pork pie? Of it all. It was like realizing the Hogwarts letter never got lost. They just didn't want you. She didn't explain. Didn't offer a backstory. No medical miracle. No breakthrough surgery involving lasers and hope. Just sat down, crossed her perfectly operational legs, and asked if I'd seen the charger for her Kindle. Her bloody Kindle. Not, "Oh, darling, I've been cured." Not, "You've been lied to." By 2 entire families and a team of physiotherapists with acting degrees. Just, "Have you seen the Kindle charger?" Like this was Tuesday and not the emotional unraveling of my entire adult life. I laughed out loud. That weird manic, slightly unhinged laugh that makes the dog leave the room and your soul check out early. And she goes, "Are you all right?" Am I all right? I've just watched a woman rise from a year-long wheelchair con like she's staging the resurrection, live at the O2, and she's asking if I'm all right? I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to throw the pork pie. But instead I nodded, and because we're British and said, "Fine, bit surprised. Thought you couldn't walk." And she just smiled. One of those cryptic, posh little smiles that says, "I've had the power all along, darling. But you were never really the main character, were you?" And in that moment I realized I had married someone who could lie about walking, and yet still had the gall to critique my sock choices and make vague comments about timing over toast. So yeah, she walked into the lounge like it was casual, and I apparently was the only one not in on the joke. So, later that night, after I'd recovered from the whole surprise, "I can walk and your life is a lie" bombshell, she sat me down for a chat. You know it's bad when they sit you down, not an argument, not a shout, just a calm, eerie, "Shall we talk?" that has the same emotional weight as a priest entering with a clipboard. She made us tea first, which honestly just felt rude. If you're going to dismantle someone's entire reality, maybe don't do it over a Twinings Earl Grey like it's Tuesday Bridge Club. She looked me dead in the eye and went, I suppose you're wondering how long I've been able to walk. I wanted to say, since this afternoon, Abigail. I saw it with my own 2 eyes and pork pie-induced trauma. But instead I nodded like a man who's one sigh away from a full breakdown in Sainsbury's. And then she confessed. The whole soap opera, the whole gothic novel wrapped in Waitrose packaging. Turns out the paralysis was a lie. A full-blown, Oscar-worthy performance, and I don't throw compliments lightly, but I've seen West End theater with less commitment. She faked the whole thing to get out of an arranged marriage with some chinless wonder in Hampshire. Apparently, her parents had lined up this Brexit Barbie and Ken situation with a family who own half of the Cotswolds and a private pheasant, and the only way out? Fake a tragic accident. Cue the polo incident. Now, I don't play polo. You don't play polo. No one outside of Downton Abbey plays bloody polo. But it was just obscure enough to be believable. A freak accident, a tragic fall, oh darling, not the spinal cord. Wherein suddenly our Abigail was the nation's favorite tragic heiress. Her family bought it. Mine bought it. Even the nurse who came round once a week. Though now I realize she was mostly there for the biscuits and a gossip. She said, and I quote, I just needed to stall them long enough to get access to the trust fund. They wouldn't release the inheritance if I married for love. But they would if I was helpless. Helpless. And there it was, the word. The key to the kingdom of tax-free wealth. Play the part of the delicate porcelain doll and boom. Money. Legacy secured. Freedom achieved. Sucker of a husband emotionally compromised and busy pruning roses. And the kicker. She said it with zero shame. No tears, no guilt. Just that calm, slightly amused tone she uses when she talks about someone using the wrong wine glass at dinner. I didn't even know how to respond. Because technically she hadn't lied to me. Not directly. Not with words anyway. She never actually said, I can't walk. She just let everyone assume, which in hindsight is the poshest form of manipulation. Just stay quiet and let the peasants draw their own conclusions. And I was the idiot. The naive, emotionally damaged golden retriever of a man who just wanted to do the right thing. I stood by her, married her, defended her to family and strangers and the bloke down the pub who called me a mug, and oh look, he was right. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared into my tea like it might offer answers. Spoiler, it didn't. It was lukewarm and underwhelming, much like my emotional state and sex life at that point. And here's the worst part, and I hate myself for saying it. I was impressed. Genuinely. Horrified, yes. Traumatized, of course. But also, low-key impressed. Because it takes balls to fake a disability for a year, con 2 entire families, and walk away, literally, with a couple of million in inheritance and barely a hair out of place. The audacity. The admin alone must have been exhausting. So I sat there nodding like an idiot, and all I could think was, this is why people go to therapy. This is why people move to Sheffield and open vegan cafes and change their name to something like Ash. Because when your marriage turns out to be based on a medical lie and a very upper-class grift, you either develop a sense of humor or a drinking problem, sometimes both. And that's when I realized the disability was fake, the marriage was fake. The only thing real was the pork pie, and even that was disappointing. The next morning, I broke the news to my parents. You know when you think, right, this is going to be awful, but surely it can't be that bad. Yeah, wrong. Mom reacted like we'd told her the dog had joined a cult. She went full EastEnders, 1 second standing, next second sobbing into the living room carpet like she'd just found out the Queen was a lizard and had stolen her casserole dish. She kept repeating, my son, my boy, married a scammer, like I was the main plotline in a BBC drama. She never agreed to watch but was now fully committed to out of rage. Then she started aggressively hoovering, which in our house is the final stage of grief. Dad? Oh, Dad was on another planet. He just sat there in his armchair with his arms crossed, looking oddly impressed. All he said, I kid you not, and was, bloody brilliant con, that. Textbook stuff. Cheers, Dad, glad you're inspired. Might fake a coma next and see if I can get a shed out of it. He even asked if she'd written it all down somewhere, for future reference. Like he was planning a heist or just needed new material for pub chat. Honestly, he looked like a man who'd just watched Ocean's 11 and started considering a second career in deception. Mum, meanwhile, was shrieking about, "The neighbors will talk," as if Janice over the road hadn't already seen her crying into a bottle of Pinot in her dressing gown 3 Thursdays in a row. And I just sat there numb, not even dramatic numb, just the quiet, slightly damp kind. The kind of numb where you forget you've got a cuppa going cold next to you because you're too busy contemplating every life choice since year 9. I kept thinking about Holly, about how I'd traded her in, her warmth, her unhinged sense of humor, her lasagna that could bring a man back from the brink of death, for a human episode of Made in Chelsea. With a martyr complex. She made me laugh. She made me feel. And now she was gone, probably thriving, probably shagging some bloke with a functional emotional range and both eyebrows. I looked at my parents, one having a breakdown over the rug, the other mentally Googling how to convincingly fake spinal injury, and thought, this family needs counseling, or wine, or both. And the worst part? I still wasn't even angry at Abigail. I mean, I should have been. Most people would be. But after a year of emotional whiplash and watching her do Oscar-tier performances in our own home, I think I'd run out of outrage. All I had left was a sort of dazed admiration, like you feel watching a lion eat a gazelle. Horrifying, yes, but impressive. So I stood up, picked up Mum's Hoover cord, unplugged it, and said, "I'm going to Greg's. Anyone want a sausage roll? Because sometimes that's all you can do. Get a pastry, sit in your car, and scream into the steering wheel while people walk past assuming you're just into Coldplay." In the end, there was no big fight, no dramatic revelations. No one got slapped with a handbag or threw a plate, like in those teledramas where someone always ends up weeping in a conservatory. No, we had a very British breakup, sat opposite each other at the dining table like it was a council mediation meeting. Abigail brought out a tray of tea, 2 mugs matching. Mine said keep calm, hers said and carry on. The irony was suffocating, and then she slid a packet of custard creams between us like a peace offering, or maybe a bribe. We both knew they were stale, but it felt wrong not to accept. It was like taking communion at the church of middle-class delusion. She looked at me, calm, collected, unnervingly unbothered, and said, "You're a decent lad, just a bit too obedient for your own good. I mean, harsh, but fair. Like telling someone their haircut's dreadful but they've got a nice neck." I didn't argue. Couldn't really. I'd spent the past year nodding like a bobblehead on a dashboard, while she faked paralysis and emotionally gaslit the entire Surrey home counties. She said we should keep it clean, civil. No point making a fuss, which is posh bird code for I've already moved on and your tears would clash with my pharaoh and ball color palette. So we divvied up the life we never really had. She kept the house, obviously. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a garden she never weeded but posted about constantly on Instagram. I got the kettle. And the cat, which, let's be honest, was the best I could have hoped for. The kettle was reliable. The cat liked me. That's more than I can say for most of my relationships. We hugged. Not a real hug. One of those awkward side ones. Like 2 people trying not to catch feelings or germs. And then she said cheerio, like she was popping down to Waitrose and not ending. A legal union built entirely on deception and denial. I left quietly. No tears, no pleading, no soundtrack swelling in the background. Just me, the kettle, and the cat, Trevor, if you must know, crammed into the back of an Uber. The driver didn't say a word, bless him. I think he sensed I was emotionally raw and one Ed Sheeran lyric away from completely unraveling. And then I was back, flat above a chip shop in Hackney, smelled like vinegar and regret. Single bed, mold on the ceiling, constant sound of someone below arguing about cod portions. But hey, at least no one was lying about spinal trauma for financial gain, so small wins. Trevor sat on the windowsill and stared, out like he was reconsidering his life choices too. I made us both a cuppa in the stolen kettle and ate us slightly. Crushed custard cream I'd nicked from the tray. Tasted like closure and disappointment. Mostly disappointment. And that was that. Divorced, defeated, but at least I'd survived the weirdest marriage since Charles and Diana. Next time, I'm dating someone with emotional literacy and at least 1 foot in reality. Or maybe I'll just buy a second cat. Safer that way. So here we are, divorced, traumatized, 384 in my Monzo, and a scratch on my soul where my dignity used to live. Holly's off living her best life. Now I'm dating a Scottish girl named Sky who builds bicycles for orphans and probably composts her own emotional baggage. I mean, good for her, truly. Nothing says I've moved on like dating someone who owns both a rescue greyhound and moral integrity. Meanwhile, I'm back on Tinder. And let me tell you, it's a bleak wasteland of dog mums, gym selfies, and people whose entire personality is crypto investor and semi-nomadic. One woman listed her hobbies as alignment and breathwork. I don't even know what that means. I just wanted someone to split a Chinese with and maybe not fake. A neurological condition. Apparently that's asking too much. I've matched with a Pilates instructor who spells your as a manicurist who calls me hun before we've even met, and one bloke who opened with so, what's your star sign and body count? I unmatched immediately. I'm divorced, not emotionally deranged. And you know what the kicker is? Every single one of them is somehow still less terrifying than what I just got out of. So I swipe, I scroll. I stare at people holding fish in their profile pictures and wonder how we all collectively lost the plot, financially ruined. I'm eating toast for dinner and pretending I meant to. Emotionally? Like a badly rolled cigarette, frayed at the edges, burns too fast and definitely smells like regret. But spiritually? Oh, I'm thriving. If thriving means occasionally crying into my hoodie at 1 a.m. while watching first dates and yelling, "Run! Susan, he's clearly a red flag with a beard." And yet, weirdly, I'm grateful. Not in the everything happens for a reason kind of way. That's bollocks. Sometimes life just happens and you get mugged by it in broad daylight while smiling politely. But I dodged a life of performative brunches, staged Instagram captions, and pretending I didn't know my wife was auditioning for a BAFTA in Best Fake Disability. And hey, I've got a hell of a story. An absolute corker of a cautionary tale. The kind that makes people go, "Oh my God, no way," and then quietly check their partner isn't hiding a wheelchair in the loft. And I've got Trevor, the cat, still here, still judging me from the windowsill like he's seen my soul and found it wanting. But he hasn't left yet. He still sits on my chest when I'm hungover and slightly suicidal, which is either affection or dominance, I'm not sure. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Single, scarred, and slightly saltier than a bag of Walkers. But at least this time when I fall apart, it's honest. No secrets, no lies. No wheelchairs. Just me, the cat, and a dating app bio that now reads, "We're recently divorced, not disabled, emotionally available most days, and fully house-trained." Cheers to that.